Welcome back to another episode of the Slang Self Doubt Podcast. It's your girl, Felicia Wallace. As always, I start the top of the show thanking all of the listeners. I will continue to start every show with the same thing because without you guys, I would not be here. So I want you to know how appreciative I am, how thankful that and grateful that I am that you just continue to listen, you continue to reach out, you continue to show up, and you continue to support. So I do want you to know that I pay attention to those things. I pay attention to those of you all who took the survey, who want me to talk about, some other topics. I pay attention to the people who DM me, who tag me and stuff. Like, thank you so, so much. And I just ask that you just continue to share the podcast with those that you feel like should listen, who should be on this journey with you, with us, in slaying our self doubt. So, again, thank you. The wins for this week. So I had some personal wins this week. For me, I've talked to you all before about my health journey, along with this, slaying self doubt journey, that I am on this health journey of having a healthier lifestyle and wanting to be healthy, not only for my kids, but my kids, and Lord willing, my kids, right? Great. However that works, right? And I've done some things. Y'all know, in December I went to the doctors a lot, and made sure that like certain things were going. Like I wanted to just check all the things. Plus, y'all know I hit 40 in November, and so because of that, I needed to make sure everything was on point. And I had a couple of things that I had to check out. And last week I got the all clear that all the things that I was focusing on and was worried about, because you just never know, right? Like until you actually go see if something's wrong, you don't know if anything is wrong. And so I am just grateful that everything came back normal, or as normal as possible. And I will be able to live a long and healthy life as long as I continue down this path, right? So one of the things that my doctor said. So I had to see a cardiologist. And so he was very much so like, no, let's not take the foot off the gas, right? Like you're doing well, and we've seen some improvement. But a lot of times you have people, and I know this from being in healthcare, that people see a change and they're like, oh, okay, well, I can take this medication, or I can do this and continue the same lifestyle. And it's like, no, you want to continue down the same path because you can see that it has changed, versus seeing an immediate change, right? And then being like, oh, I can just kind of fluctuate. And so I was like, oh, nah, Slim, you don't have to worry about that. That was the one thing that I was worried about, was like my heart. Like I was just like, Lord, I ain't ready, Elizabeth. I'm not ready. I wasn't ready, right? Um, and so once he just told me like I was good and just to continue to do what I was doing, like I was like, all right, I'm really gonna have to just really continue to focus on that. And so for me, that was a big goal of mine, to just get at uh, um, like just to know what was going on. And so now that I know, I'm good. I am excited about it. Okay. Also this week, one of the things I think I told you all a couple of weeks ago, or I've said multiple times on here, but I finally like took a huge jump. And for me, because a couple of weeks ago I told you guys that imposter syndrome was kicking in for me, especially when it comes to coaching. Because this I do well. Like the podcast, recording, doing interviews, pitching for people. Like this is easy for me, right? It wasn't before. It wasn't before. We all know that. But it is. And so coaching is like the same way for me. It was just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how I'm supposed to start. What if this? What if that? And yeah, I went ahead and I put everything out there, and I said, this is what's going to happen. And so far I had three people that reached back out to me and was like, oh, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, and so it is power in, let me just say this fairly quickly. Like it is something about just doing, right? Just starting, just putting yourself out there, and trusting the process, trusting exactly what it is that God has already said. So, especially because you all know this is a God thing. This is not a Felicia thing. This ain't a Bun thing. I did not think of this. I did not want it. And it is literally God, like, taking control over this. And I just had to have the faith that I had to leave my job, right? I had to reach back and go to that faith to be able to say, okay, like what made you leave? What made you believe that there was something greater? Because if I hadn't believed, I would have just stayed where I was at, right? So it really was for me, was a mindset shift that I had to take, of just being like, if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, then I definitely need to make some. I have to have it. There has to be some action behind it, right? And so one of the things that and during this time, like as we've been talking about, for this last month about self doubt in your relationships, one of the things that I thought of it in the midst of all of this is like how self doubt shows up in your purpose as well, right? Y'all have seen it. This right here is evident of it. And so I definitely want to dig deeper next week, and we'll have a conversation about it. But I literally took a step again to just say, this is what we're doing. And I just have to every day, moment by moment, kind of, someone that I interviewed this week, who you will hear the interview later. One of the things that she said, and it really resonated with me, is that every moment by moment, she just surrenders to her gifts. And because I know this is what I'm supposed to do, it's a moment by moment, daily surrendering to my gifts and just allowing, she said it best, like, to lean in. And so that's what I'm doing. And that's a win, because y'all know, normally I probably would have just sat on it. I would have been paralyzed by fear, about doubt. I would have procrastinated, like, and nothing would have happened. And so there are some other things that I really want to do. And I'm just like, okay, here we go. So yeah, that's a win for me. So I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna take it. Announcements for this week. Same as always, right? March 1st, which is next week, is when the group coaching will launch. And when I say that, that means that what will happen is, those of you all who are already signed up on the wait list, you will receive an email of next steps. Those of you all who are interested, you better get on this wait list so that you can get next steps. But it will be out, and you'll have a period of time where you can sign up for it, and then we will be fully starting it. And that's been a process in itself as well. And we will definitely talk about that later, because, child, that was y'all already know how I be. What else? What else? What else? I think that's the only announcement. Oh no, there is another announcement. So I know I've been on here talking about Clubhouse and saying that I'm on there twice a week. And last week, again, in making decisions that bring me the most peace. So one of the things that I've always kind of said is, like, I need a date to myself, and I need, being as though I'm in a space to be create my own time and create my own schedule. Like, I don't have to, like, pile stuff on top of stuff, right? And I really wanted to use Sunday as my self-care days. And that means that whatever I want to do, I just do. Like, that's it. And so I started out doing clubhouses on Sundays. And then God, like, kind of shifted me to Wednesday. And so last week I was in this place again where I was just like, am I gonna do Sundays and Wednesdays? Like, that's just a lot. And I've told y'all, like, before I do anything, whether it's the podcast, anytime there's speaking and there's people involved, it does not matter. I have, like, this angst. Just it's a mix between excitement and anxiety, but it's just I don't want to feel that, like, every day of the week. And so I was just like, Sundays, I'm not doing it. So I will be on Clubhouse on Wednesdays going forward. Um I'm deciding on a time. I think it'll be between 12 and 2, because that's usually people's lunchtime, to be able to hold space. So I'm doing the exact same thing. We will have a topic, but we'll also hold space for people to just connect, to have a conversation, to just be able to talk about self doubt and have that space. I have learned over these last couple of months of doing it, is that people do need a safe space and a brave space to be able to talk about something they can't normally talk about. And so I am going to facilitate those conversations, and I still want that to be a space, but it will be on Wednesdays now, not Sundays and Wednesdays. Okay. So if you're on Clubhouse, make sure you're following me at Slay Self Doubt. If you're not following me on Instagram, I'm slaying self doubt on Instagram. And so, yeah, just, follow us and just stay connected to me. So last week we talked about self doubt in regards to our relationships with our friends, right? And I think that was a really good conversation, just because I told y'all before, for myself, so it showed up in two different ways. It showed up, at two different times, and how I reacted to it was kind of the same, but not really. And just knowing now, like, that I had it. Yeah, again, there was no name for it. I didn't have any words to be able to say when I was in middle school, and even in my 20s. There was no word that I had that I could describe what it was that I was feeling. And so because of that, like it was just difficult for me. So but being able to now put a name on it and be able to understand that that's what it was self-doubt and my own insecurities. I'm able to now navigate those feelings if they come up again in other relationships, right? And so here we are this week talking about self-doubt and parenting. For me, uh self-doubt came when I found out I was pregnant, right? Because you never know if you're ready. Like you just aren't. This is the whole person. And I think that I was nervous. I was antsy. I knew I wanted a boy. I knew I didn't want a girl. And I felt like I did not want a girl because I was like, I know how I was as a kid, and I did not want that to come back to me twofold. Funny story though, both of my kids are exactly like me when it comes to like the sarcasm and it comes to like their quick-wittedness. And I'll be like, y'all can't, for those of you who are listening, you can't see my face, but for those of you are watching, you can see my face. It'd be like, and my husband's always like, that's you right there, that is you. It is so funny. And so it was like it didn't matter. I thought that it would have been a girl who was gonna give me a run for my money, and these boys is, listen, and they moody. Okay, I'm in that tween and teenage stage. These kids is moody as all get out. But how self doubt has showed up in my parents and has shifted, you know, year after year, right? Because one, each kid is different, right? My oldest son was always quiet, very much so. You could sit there by him in the middle of a room. He would not move. When I say he would not move, he would not move. You didn't have to worry about him. He would just sit, you give him something, he watched TV. He was just very focused, and he was okay with kind of being by himself. He didn't need to be, he's very like careful about what he does, and just, it's just different. My youngest son, this Bama would jump for the roof if he thought he could make it. And even if he didn't, he'd be like, I just break my legs. Like that's how he be. And so when you have those different type of personalities, everything it comes up kind of differently. And so for my oldest son with self-doubt kind of showed up was in like making sure that, so our story is different, right? Like I was basically a single mom for a period of time. And so having that self-doubt of, did I do him a disservice by not trying to fully work things out to his best ability with his dad, or whether or not, I didn't want, at the time, I was like, I didn't want to be a statistic. And so, whether or not that was going to affect him later on in life, even when I'm met my husband, and like us becoming a unit was like, how is this going to affect him? Like I second guessed every single thing because I felt like in the beginning I had to overperform or overachieve, because I felt guilt, right? And I felt guilt about his father and I's relationship and how it would affect him. That for me, for a very, very long time, I felt like I over pacified him. I over, you know, like tried to make sure he was always comfortable, right? With my youngest son, he grew up differently, two-parent household. His dad is here, and he has that. I had somebody that I could be like, can you do this? Can you do that? But even still in those moments in the beginning, my husband would tell you, like, I legit probably did everything, and I didn't necessarily make him do anything because I was so used to doing it by myself, right? And so even when it came to my youngest son, it was like I wanted it to be different. So then I tried to do things differently. In the first year of my youngest son's life, he had a medical emergency, and so he had to have surgery at like 7 months, and that changed things for me. Like then I babied him, right? So now I'm so worried about what happened to him that now I'm just like, okay, I want him to know that I'm just double check on him, making sure that he was always he had whatever he needed, because I just treated him like a baby, right? But again, it was guilt. It was guilt of, now I didn't have anything to do with why he had to have the medical emergency. He was born with like a little flap in his extra flap, like in his throat or whatever. And so it's a name for it, I can't remember. But how he used to breathe, it used to sound like he was snoring even though he was wide awake. And so they called it stridor. But that flap eventually, two different times he ended up stopping, like, and so he had reflux, and he had that And so he ended up two different times having a moment where he stopped breathing. And so we went to Children's, and I was like, listen, there was nothing else wrong with him. I said, take that flap off. If he don't need it, we good. And the crazy part about it is that once the flap was removed, like he literally blossomed into a whole different kid. Like the energy that he has was completely different. It was like me and my husband were like, young, he is different. Like this is not the same kid we brought in before we came into this hospital. But because of those things, like my guilt of even, like I said, even knowing that that had nothing to do with me, um, it was just like the I don't it was like the mom guilt of like I don't want nothing to happen to my baby. I want to make sure that should I have gotten it removed earlier, like I knew, was I really not paying attention, those type of things. And then again, with and being in a blended family has its own structure to it, right? Like making sure that this my oldest son gets quality time with his dad, and making sure that excuse me, that nobody feels like they're left out. And I felt like for a very, very long time I was literally trying to hold all the families together. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to do it all by myself to make sure everybody had a relation, because I wanted things, as much as they were not normal, to seem normal, right? I never wanted either one of them to feel slighted. And again, that's my own guilt, and that was my own insecurity. And it wasn't until I broke my foot when I was in like 2011, and I couldn't do nothing. I was on bed rest for 8 weeks, like literally could not get out the bed, right? Just to use the bathroom. That was it. And I had no choice but to surrender parenting to two people who were used to me being the middle person, right? And so what that in those type of in that situation, what ended up happening is that they figured it out, right? And once they figured it out, I was kind of like, oh, okay, then I guess I don't need to. Then it was, grandparents stepping in, and oh, I'll come pick them up, and I'll do this and I'll do that. And it became, the crazy part about it is it became what I wanted it to be, what I envisioned and how I wanted things to go. It became that once I took my hands off. And that is like beyond me. And so I'm always like, Lord, you didn't have to break my foot. Even though that wasn't his fault, but still, I didn't have to get sat all the way down for it to become what it is that I wanted. But one of the things that I learned is that I had to relinquish some control to these other people who were just as capable as I was, right? And also, I realized who wanted the same thing that I wanted. So when they were younger, that thing kind of it became exactly what I wanted. So as the kids kind of grew up, the things change once you reach a certain age, so now my kids are 11 and 13, and you're at this tween age, the tween and teenage years, where I told y'all earlier, they is moody, is all get out. And being able to keep them together, meaning like, understanding like this your brother, right? I don't care what happens. Y'all been raised together. Your brother is, when it come down to it, y'all all y'all got, right? But also like understanding I gotta let them figure it out on their own, because I'm like, me and my sister used to fuss. I mean, we ain't, I've heard some stories of other people's, and there was this one time. But outside of that, for the most part, like we got along well, I'm sure. And I was the oldest, so I know what it was like for your little sibling to be annoying, right? And to just get on your nerves. And for me, I think I feel like we've talked about this before. Y'all know I be trying to control stuff, and I think that for some things, I my self doubt of like wanting things to be a certain type of way from them, I tend to try to control situations and try to navigate them into a certain space, even though we could have a conversation, and I'll say like, well, y'all should do this and the third, and then they'll be like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And then I'll sit there and I'll ask, okay, so it make sense to me, right? And once they explain it, I'll be like, oh, okay, y'all idea actually is better than mine. But I'm starting to notice that I have actually given them the things that they need to succeed. I have actually set a foundation for them to be able to be the type of young men that I want them to be, right? And one of the things that I, even say for myself that I am learning is that and is that God has given me everything I need to be able to raise these kids. My God gave me these two kids. He gave me my sons, not nobody else's sons, but he gave me my sons, which he knew that I was capable of raising them into the men that he wants them to be, with his assistance and with his help and with his guidance. And I don't have to control the situation, because the other part is that he's guiding them too, right? And so this is another thing of this leaning in, and this surrendering to him, and understanding that you already have what you need, and not second guessing the decisions. We're not going to get it perfect, because we're not perfect, right? We're doing the best that we have with what we have. We're also doing the best that we have with what how we were taught, or what we saw as parenting. And a lot of us, I can definitely say, especially a lot of people within my circle, are trying to do things differently with their kids. They are intentionally, wanting to raise as best as we can whole adults, right? What male or female, we want. My cousin, the family advocate, Salika Wood, says it best. Like, I'm trying to raise adults that do not have to heal from their childhood, or don't have to, like, they don't have to try to figure things out, re-raise themselves as adults, right? We hear this, I've heard this before, people talking about like reparenting, right? Because and once we are adults, we are dealing with our childhood trauma, whatever that might look like, right? People hear the word trauma and immediately they think of abuse. Trauma don't have to be abuse. It could be a trauma is anything that's happened to you that is of significance. That I didn't look this definition up, so I'm paraphrasing here. But trauma is something that it just kind of sticks with you, right? Like, you fall on your bike, you remember that you got that when you see that scrape on your knee. That's like, oh, I remember that. That was from '84. I fell down fell down off the bike, scraped my knee, and the neighbor came out. Like, that's a traumatic experience, right? Like, and then so it stays with you. And so when you think about certain things that you're having these conversations about, or you're thinking about things that, like, how you were raised and what you want differently for your kids and how you parent and all those things. And that's not to say that your parents did things wrong, in certain situations. It's just the same thing. They did the best that they could with what they had, and we're doing the same thing. And I think the difference is that I am, for myself, I'm being intentional about being a different type of parent, right? And so I would say, in closing out, like, when we're talking about how your self doubt shows up, and again, going all the way back to the beginning, that it shows up in all your relationships, being able to see how it shows up will determine how it affects your children, right? One of the things I've talked about before is that y'all know that I suffer from anxiety. And I've said this story plenty of times on here, that I did not realize how bad my anxiety was until I saw it in my son. And it was frustrating to me. Like, I could see that he was anxious about something that literally none of us had any control over, but he was so worked up about it. And it was in that moment that I said, I don't think that I intentionally became I don't think I intentionally was anxiety ridden around them. It was subconscious for me. Was I was anxious throughout most of my pregnancy, right? And so did he get that from there? And then you again, here we go with that guilt thing of thinking like I gave them these things, with my youngest son, he has asthma, allergies, vitiligo. I have all those things, right? And so then it's the guilt of that too. Like, oh, I've given my kids these things, and but what I've turned it around is like now we having a conversation about it. Now we embrace it. Now we are like, okay, so what do we do when an anxious moment comes up? Instead of like hiding it or pretending. When my son first had vitiligo, I was like, "Mommy got the same thing. Let me show you." When we tried to go through the medications, and I was like, "Do you want to for it to go away?" Once he had a name for it and he was able to say what it was, and we was able to explain it to him, I said, "You make the decision." We did go to the dermatologist, and then it would, you had to use. He would have to use like cortisone for the rest of his life. And so eventually he was just like, "No, I'm okay with it. I know what it is, and it's fine. It's not that big of a deal." And I was like, Okay. Like we check in on it, but I think it's empowering my kids with certain things now that I may have the things that I felt guilty about. Instead of me being guilty and feeling sad, instead I'm explaining it to them and I'm empowering them with the information of knowing that they are not alone. You're not doing this by yourself. Mommy has it too, and it's okay, right? And you see that I'm flourishing. I'm okay with these ailments or with these things that make me just a little bit different. It is completely fine, right? And so I would just encourage you that if you have some guilt about certain things that you feel like maybe you could have done something differently, or maybe you could have done something, you want to do things that it's never too late. It literally is never too late. Your kids are your kids until you are gone or they are gone. That is facts. Like you will be parenting in a different way in every season of their life. My mother still parents me in some ways. I'm 40 years old, and there's times where I have to call her and we have a different type of conversation. She ain't telling me what to do, right? But there's times where I have to glean from her wisdom as somebody who's already who's been a parent. But again, she's now talking to me woman to woman in a different type of way, but I still have to respect her as my mother, that this information is just not from some random person. It's from my mom, right? And so with that, it's still, as far as I'm concerned, it's still parenting. Shoot, it'll be certain things, even at 40, if I gotta call her, I will think that thing out. Okay, like if I tell her this and then tell her that, I wonder what she gonna say. Like Millie got my utmost respect. I don't do no faking. And anybody that know Millie know Millie don't be playing. So you gotta make sure that you come to her correct. Okay. But yeah, I think that self-doubt in parenting is not in your parenting is not abnormal. I think it's okay. I just would encourage you to explore it, and talk to your kids. Like your kids are people. They are people, and they're little people that will become older people, right? And so having those conversations with them and bringing them into the conversation, I think is such a blessing, and just having them feel like they are a part. I think that makes a difference as well, when it comes to certain things, right? Like whatever, however you decide to do it. But I think if you're having, any doubts about whether or not you can make a change or you can start to be intentional, you definitely can. Um, I will put some books on the y'all. I'm sorry. Uh, there's a book that my cousin Salika Wood recommended. I actually think it's called Intentional Parenting. I will put that in the show notes. She definitely recommends that. I will also tag her in it because she definitely believes in intentional and gentle parenting. And so if that's something that you're interested in, you're gonna follow her. She's at on IG at no ordinary mom, no underscore ordinary underscore mom. But I'll put that in the show notes as well. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Next week, I think we're going to talk about self doubt and purpose. We'll see though. Next week is March. Y'all, we already in March, okay? And I think I mentioned this last week, but I will be honoring 31 women who have been on the show for the month of March because it is Women's History Month. And I'm just so proud, really, because for a multitude of reasons. Number one, because the fact that I've actually interviewed that many people, right? To be able to honor them is icing on the cake. But to be able to say that I've done that when at one point in time I was nervous out of my mind about being able to do that, and I'm so grateful. Man, I'm grateful. So that it is definitely is something that I'm excited to be able to do, because I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful for them being a part of this journey. I'm proud of what they've done and what they're doing, and I just can't wait to just kind of review where they were when they started and where they are now. So make sure y'all are following me on Instagram because that's where it will be. I'll be posting it every day on Instagram at Slaying Self Doubt so that you can see those women, and then you can go back and listen to the episode. So yeah, until next week, see ya.